Daylight spilled gently through the tall glass windows of the Velvet Oak, a five-star restaurant known for its exclusivity and elegance. Every polished glass shimmered under the midday sun, and the soft sound of classical piano filled the air. Waiters glided between tables dressed in black and white, their trays gleaming with silver. Yet amid the quiet elegance, a sudden hush fell over the room. Heads turned. A frazzled little girl, her braids undone and her small sneakers squeaking against the marble floor, ran straight into the dining hall, tears streaking her dusty cheeks. Behind her, a man in a faded blue work shirt hurried in, clearly out of place among the tailored suits and diamond bracelets. The little girl darted toward a woman seated at the corner table, a woman whose presence made the air itself seem still. Amara Vale, Billionaire Heiress, and CEO of Vale Industries. But the girl didn't reach her. She was stopped by a stern hostess who tried to usher her out. Then came that calm, grounded voice, cutting through the tension like steady thunder. "She's with me," said the man. The room stilled again. Amara turned her head slowly, and when her eyes met his, her hand trembled ever so slightly around her champagne glass. If you believe in kindness, forgiveness, and the beauty of second chances, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Journal. Your support helps us continue spreading stories that remind the world love still matters. No one in that restaurant knew the story behind that moment, but it began months earlier in a quiet neighborhood across the city, where life wasn't filled with piano music and fine wine, but with the hum of broken machinery and the laughter of a little girl named Callie. Her father, Owen Mercer, was a single dad working 2 jobs, mechanic by day, delivery driver by night. His wife had died when Callie was just 2, and though the years had tried to harden him, Owen had held on to one unshakable truth: as long as he had his daughter, he still had everything. Their home was small, a peeling yellow duplex with a tiny porch that leaned slightly to one side, but every corner of it carried warmth. On their refrigerator hung Callie's drawings, colorful stick figures with messy smiles, always labeled Daddy and Me. Life, however, had grown increasingly difficult. The repair shop Owen worked for was closing down, and his delivery hours had been cut. He'd been chasing odd jobs just to keep the lights on. Some days dinner was pancakes made from leftover flour, but Callie would grin wide and say, "You're the best chef ever, Daddy," and he'd pretend to believe it. Then one afternoon, everything changed when a sleek black car pulled up outside the shop. Out stepped Amara Vale, the billionaire heiress, all elegance and distance, looking like she'd stepped out of another world entirely. Her car had broken down on the way to a charity event, and Owen had been the only mechanic still open. As he worked beneath the hood of her luxury sedan, he'd noticed the glint of her heels and the impatience in her sighs. She barely looked at him when he explained the issue, just nodded curtly and checked her phone. Yet something in her tone, the practiced coldness, felt like a shield rather than arrogance. When he handed back her keys, refusing her large tip, he simply said, "Just doing my job, ma'am." For the first time, she looked up, truly looked at him. There was a flicker of surprise in her eyes, as though no one had turned down her money before. A week later, she returned, not with a car problem, but with a proposal. Vale Industries was hosting a community renovation project, and she needed skilled hands to help rebuild an old recreation center in the poorer district. Owen almost refused, thinking it was too high profile for someone like him, but the pay was good. He agreed. What he didn't expect was to see Amara there every day, rolled up sleeves, clipboard in hand, directing volunteers with precision. He also didn't expect Callie to tag along after school, charming every worker and drawing chalk hearts on the sidewalk near the site. Amara had smiled, just barely, the first time Callie shyly offered her a pink crayon. From that moment, the three of them began orbiting each other's worlds. Amara, who'd built walls of steel around her heart since losing her brother in an accident years ago, found herself softening in Callie's presence. And Owen, who'd learned to survive on grit and quiet endurance, found himself looking forward to Amara's rare but genuine laughter. Yet just when things seemed to blossom, reality struck. The tabloids discovered photos of Amara at the community site, next to a mystery man and a child. Within hours, rumors spiraled. The heiress and the mechanic. Her company's board members warned her of reputational risks. The elite circles whispered cruelly about her charity romance. Her father, Victor Vale, a ruthless tycoon, summoned her to the family estate, and made it clear that any association with Owen could cost her inheritance and position. "You were born to lead, not to linger with men who fix cars," he'd said coldly. Amara didn't answer, but her silence that day spoke volumes. She stopped showing up at the site. Weeks passed, and Owen never heard from her again. Callie kept asking, "When's Miss Amara coming back?" And Owen would force a smile, saying maybe soon. But deep down, he knew she wouldn't. He tried to move on. But something about her absence felt like unfinished music, like a melody that stopped just before the final note. Then came the afternoon at the Velvet Oak. Owen had taken Callie with him on a small delivery, one that happened to lead him near the same restaurant where Amara was hosting a business luncheon. Callie, restless and curious, had slipped out of the truck when he wasn't looking, running through the doors before he could stop her. She had seen Amara through the glass, elegant, glowing, surrounded by executives, and had rushed to her without hesitation.
"Miss Amara!"
she cried. The room had frozen, and that's when Owen followed, breathless, entering a place where men like him never belonged. Every eye turned toward him, the man in oil-stained jeans, standing beneath chandeliers that cost more than his year's rent. Yet his voice, steady and calm, carried the weight of every sleepless night, every sacrifice, every truth he refused to be ashamed of. "She's with me." Amara's fork slipped from her hand. The sound of it hitting the table echoed sharply. For a long, tense moment, no one moved. Then she stood, pushing back her chair, her heartbeat roaring in her ears. Her father sat at the far end of the table, his expression unreadable. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly, his tone meant for Owen but his gaze locked on Amara. "You have responsibilities, expectations. You know what's at stake." But Amara barely heard him. Her eyes were on the man who stood protectively beside the little girl, clutching his sleeve. Owen didn't say another word. He didn't need to. Everything he wanted to say, about honesty, about love, about how her kindness had changed their lives, was already in his eyes. Amara took a deep breath, feeling the years of pressure, duty, and fear pressing against her ribs. For so long she'd believed that strength meant control, but now, looking at Owen and Callie, she realized that true strength was choosing what mattered even when the world disapproved. "I invited them," she said suddenly, her voice steady but trembling at the edges. The table of executives murmured in confusion. Her father's eyes narrowed. "This is my luncheon, father. My guests." She walked over to Callie and knelt, brushing a strand of hair from the girl's face. "I missed you," she whispered. Callie's small voice broke the silence. "We missed you too." Owen stood motionless as the scene unfolded, his heart pounding. Amara straightened, turned to the others, and said with quiet defiance, "This man taught me something your millions never could. That respect doesn't come from power, it comes from compassion. And I refuse to live another day pretending I don't know that." The restaurant remained silent for a moment longer, until slowly, one of the younger executives began to clap, then another. The sound grew, awkward at first, then genuine. Even Victor Vale's hard expression wavered. He rose, nodded once at Owen, and said in a low voice, "If he's the reason you've become this brave, perhaps I was wrong." Owen blinked, almost unable to process the words. Amara turned to him, tears bright in her eyes. "You shouldn't have had to come here," she said softly. "But I'm glad you did." He smiled faintly. "Sometimes you have to show up where you don't belong just to prove you do." Outside, the sun caught the glass of the tall windows, casting a golden light across them as they left together, Amara, Owen, and Callie, walking side by side into the daylight. It wasn't a perfect ending, not yet, but it was a beginning built on truth, courage, and love that didn't need to hide. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Journal. Your support keeps these real, human stories alive and helps us remind the world that compassion is never weakness. It's power. Special request comment below with, "She's with me," if you believe true love sees beyond status, struggle, and fear. And let's fill the world with stories that heal.